In this demonstration, we are now going to go about configuring a load balancer in Azure. So let's head straight over to the Azure portal. Okay, and in the Azure portal, just to set the stage for everything, if we go over to virtual machines, you'll notice that I have 3 virtual machines for this demonstration. I've got a jump box that I can RDP into over a public IP address. I've got 2 virtual machines, SL Test VM01 and SL Test VM02. Both of those VMs are running a simple IIS website. So if I just go into, say, Test VM02, and I'll connect in there. And if I open it up and just type in HTTP localhost, on each VM I've just got a basic web page that's been served up and just identifies the virtual machine. So we'll go back to the Azure portal and let's now go ahead and create our load balancer. So let's go to create a resource, select networking, select load balancer, and we first have to go about creating the front end portion of the load balancer. So in my case, I'm going to call this SL-internal, because we're going to create an internal load balancer -LB, and I can select here between public and internal. So we're going to choose internal, but let me just go back and show you public for the moment. When I choose public, I can choose a public IP address. This could be one I've already got created, and it can't obviously be associated with another machine already or another load balancer already. And if I want to, I can just go in here and create a new public IP, much like I would anytime I created a public IP address. But I'm going to do this internal for the moment, so let's hit internal. And when I do it as internal, I get a choice of the network, so I'm going to choose my VNet, and I'm going to choose my subnet. In this case, I'm going to choose subnet A. And you can see then I can choose how the IP address is assigned. So I can choose to statically assign the IP and just type it in this box, or I can choose dynamic and Azure will assign one to the load balancer. Then I've got my subscription and my resource group, much like every other service we create. So I'm going to use SL-network for my resource group, and I'm deploying this in North Central. So that's the front end portion of the load balancer. And if I hit create, and we'll fast forward while that creates, should take just under a minute for it to complete. And that's completed, so we'll go to that resource. And now I can start the back-end portion of the load balancer. So you can see the configuration screen. On the left-hand side, if I select front-end IP configuration, you'll see the IP that's been allocated 10007. That's because we made it dynamic. But now I can start configuring these 3 things underneath: the back-end pools, health probes, and the load balancing rules. And I'll do them in that order. So we'll start with back-end pools. And the first thing we need to do is click Add, and then give it a name. So we'll just call this SL Web Backend. And now I choose how I want to associate this. So I can select this drop-down, and I can associate it with a single virtual machine or a virtual machine scale set. Or in my case, I'm going to choose an availability set that I already have. Select that drop-down, we'll select the SLAS-web, that's my availability set with my 2 web servers running in it. Select that, and now this is very important, you need to add your target network IP configuration. So you're going to need to do 2 of these, one for each virtual machine. So we'll select this box, scroll down, choose our target virtual machine. So I'll do number 1 first of all, and we can see it's got 1 network interface. And if you hit this drop-down, select the IP, and then we'll select add again, and now we will do number 2. Select its IP, and go ahead and select OK, and that will now create that backend pool. Just hit refresh. You can see SL Web Backend already there. It's still actually provisioning, so it's got 1 virtual machine in there now. Refresh again. And there you can see we have 2 virtual machines. If I expand it out, both of those are running and are in the backend pool. The next thing we need to do now is add our health probes, which essentially monitor the virtual machines and check they're healthy and available. So let's go over to health probes, select add, give it a name, and then choose the protocol that you wish to check for. So in my case, I'm actually going to just select HTTP, And then I could select port 80, give it a path, but these parts are really important at the bottom. The interval is the amount of time between probe attempts in seconds. So every 5 seconds, it's going to check health status. And unhealthy threshold, this is the number of failures that have to occur before it considers the VM behind the load balancer unhealthy and will then take it out of the pool. And that's all there is to the probe. Go ahead and click OK. Take about 30 seconds or so. Wait for this to update before you go on to the next piece. Okay, and as you can see, our probe is now there. It's still updating, so we'll just give that a few more seconds. There we go. And now we go over to load balancing rules. So in load balancing rules, this is where it all comes together. Select add, and now we give it a name. So I'll just call this SLLB rule. And I can choose my IPv version, so 4 or 6. In this case, we're using version 4. But now I select my front-end IP address. In this case, I choose that one I created previously, 10.0.0.7. I choose my protocol, so in my case, I'm going to use port 80. And then I choose my backend port, followed by my backend pool. So in this case, I'm using that backend pool that I created, SL Web Backend. If I expand that out, you can see that's the only one I've got there, followed by my health probe, which is for port 80, HTTP. Now, if we scroll down, there's a few more settings. For example, session persistence. This allows me to maintain session state based on either the client IP or the client IP combined with the protocol. In addition, I have my idle timeout. And finally, floating IP. This is really for SQL always on availability groups that you would use this. But if I go ahead and select OK, this is now going to update the load balancer configuration. So again, we'll fast forward here. It's probably take about a minute. Okay, and we can see that that load balancing rule was created successfully. Let's go back to the overview and just grab our IP address, in this case 10.0.0.7, and let's head over to our Jumpbox machine to test it out. And so I'm just going to fast forward here as I RDP into the Jumpbox. It's a VM in the exact same subnet as our test VMs. So we're now in the Jumpbox itself, and let's open up a web browser. And if we type in 10.0.0.7, and that is all there is to it. Both of those VMs are now successfully in an availability set that we created previously when we built the VMs, so they're highly available across 2 fault domains, and they are successfully behind a load balancer as well, so traffic is being dispersed between both of them. And with that, this concludes this demonstration.